Kristine, remember when you were a kid and you thought that your career was going to be this like perfect straight line trajectory?
Oh my, yes. That is not at all what happened. It ended up being way more of a squiggle than I could have ever imagined. And I am so happy that I embraced all of the squiggles along the way.
Alrighty. Hey, Kristine, how's it going?
It's going so awesome, Colleen. How are you doing?
So good. All right. So today it's just the two of us. We haven't had one of these just Colleen and Kristine episodes in a little while. And let us jump in. So one of the things that I want to throw out there for us to start talking about today is the fact that over the past month, you did a TEDx talk. I did a closing keynote at a conference, and then I did this giant breakout at a conference because it was a breakout, but it was 450 people. So it made me laugh because that felt like a keynote, not a breakout.
100%.
So you and I have both done these things recently that got us on stage talking in front of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And through the years, every time I talk to people who are out looking for jobs and we talk about skills either they don't have or things they want to get better at, public speaking, speaking in front of a group is always on that list because this terrifies people. Mm-hmm. I love, there's an old Seinfeld episode for those of you who are of a certain age, right? Where Seinfeld talks about that people's greatest fear in life is public speaking. And the second biggest fear in life is death. And so it's like people would rather be the person in the coffin than the person on the stage. So
I'd rather be on the stage.
Me too. So I think because of that, what I wanted to chat a little bit about kind of as we start today is what we like about that. Like, how do we prepare for it? Like, what are the things that we do that have made us enjoy public speaking, as well as like what makes us good at it, right? What are the things that make it that we show up and are able to do that and people enjoy listening to us? So that was my thought for today.
No, I love it. I love this topic because I'm still like processing my TEDx, which was only 2 days ago. The first comes to mind is I want everyone to know that even though you and I do this on a regular basis, we now have a podcast, so we're public speaking on a weekly basis. I don't feel the nerves with our podcasts. I want to share that the nerves still show up. So just because we do it, have been doing it, doesn't mean we don't have those moments where the butterflies show up. And I know for me, I've learned to kind of embrace that moment. And I reminded myself on Friday that when the nerves show up, it's because I care. I care about how I am going to show up and how I'm going to deliver and what experience I want my audience to experience. So that's the first thing is I don't want everybody to think that Colleen and Kristine, they got this going on, because I know for me, I still have those moments and it's a reminder that I care.
So it's funny for me because I've loved public speaking since I was a child. It is the thing that as far back as I can remember, early elementary school, like I was always the kid who raised my hand to speak at assemblies and, even at like church, I would ask if I could do the readings, and we were at a really big church. So all of that I love. So the nerves don't hit me. What I do worry about when I do get on stage is, am I delivering something that people are going to leave with, right? What is that aha moment? What is the thing that made it worthwhile for them to listen to me for half hour, an hour, or your 12-minute TEDx talk, right? TEDx is so funny in that sense that, it's like these very specific timeframes where, right, most conferences, the closing keynote I did last week was an hour and 15 minutes. Right? So it's like, what do I want people to leave with? And so I agree, there is that we really do care piece. And it's important to us that we are doing a good job. I also think that if you and I were making widgets or baking cakes or sweeping the
Be the
streets.
same.
Be
It
the
would
same.
Be the same.
Right? We would
Yeah.
both be showing up with that moment of, am I doing a good job? Am I doing this right?
And to add to that too, and I was reminded about this on Friday night when I was receiving feedback after. They asked us to be available for audience to come and chat with us and that type of thing. And, you know, it was really interesting the feedback that I received. It was consistent, actually, from everybody that did come and give me feedback. The one thing that I was reminded of is that, yes, we want to be delivering, like you said, that piece of wisdom, that nugget, that takeaway, and yet everybody has their own unique takeaway.
Right.
And
right.
so what we think is going to be like the grand fireworks display of like, this is going to change everybody's life. It could be something so simple. It could be a transition between one theme to another or one story to another. And so my reminder on Friday night was the entire presentation that I'm putting together and making sure that I'm weaving my words of wisdom and the golden nuggets throughout, whether it be 12 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, that they are weaved within that time frame, because I actually don't know what is going to land for everybody in the audience. And it was really cool when I was chatting with people afterwards, you know, what stood out.
Right. And that happens to me all the time, either in trainings, on these podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The nuggets that people come back and say, this was the thing that I learned, always surprises me. Actually, whenever I do a workshop or keynote or something, right? Keynotes, I hand out postcards, or they're postcard size, but it says, right, this is how I'm going to squiggle, and people get to write it. And so at the end, I always ask folks, right, okay, take out your card. Let's all write, like, what is the one thing you're going to squiggle? And afterwards, a lot of people come up and show me theirs or tell me theirs, and it's all over the place, right? Sometimes it might be career, it might be life, it might be something as simple as turning their desk to face the window, and, you know, little things like that. So, you know, it's all of those pieces that you have no idea how it's going to affect someone.
Absolutely. So just circling back to your original sort of question topic for us to riff today, you know, you had said, you know, what do we do to prepare? Well, one of the things that we do is we prepare, we practice. And I know for me, last week, I left my condo many times and I went and wandered the streets. And I found myself in the park just reciting my presentation. And it was slightly different each time, which was okay. For those of you that are, you know, wanting to step out of your comfort zone, practice. It takes, you know, sometimes our podcast is organic 100%. And yet our presentations, our keynotes, our TEDx's are all very much rehearsed and practiced.
Yeah, but I will say from my point of view, it's not scripted, right? I am not memorizing a script. I have a handful of key points. When I use PowerPoint, it's typically photo slides of just pictures that are up there that keep us on track and remind me what the next story is that I want to talk about. But it's definitely not memorized, because I find when people memorize, if you get caught up at some point, that's where the panic sets in, right? All of a sudden you trip over one word that you've memorized in a speech. All of a sudden you're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, right? And now there are some folks who reading theirs in the beginning, I find that to be very comforting. You know, if you are giving a speech that, you know, there are definitely times for keynotes, or I think like college commencement addresses, right? The college is going to say, send me your speech, where they want to see every word you're going to say to make sure that things out there, right? So there are times that you are going to read your speech or put up on a teleprompter. But in general, you know, if you can have some high level bullets and kind of have that flow and you've practiced it a bunch of times, it's going to come out a little different each time, and that's okay.
And that's okay. I love that you just brought up memorization. I used that word when I was chatting with a friend last week, and I said to her something along memorizing my presentation, and she quickly changed my word from memorization to internalization.
Love it.
Okay.
That makes total sense, right?
Yes.
You're internalizing it so you could genuinely, naturally talk about it, as opposed to here I am reading like a robot, right?
Yes. So there's another tip for all of you. Because when you think about having to memorize something, I know last week my anxiety went. And when I thought about internalizing it, it was more of a feeling of embodying it. And I had feedback on Friday about my stage presence and my voice and how I was delivering and the pauses and the things that I thought maybe nobody noticed were the things that most people noticed. So that's another tip, in terms of stepping outside your comfort zone, finding those opportunities to speak, whether it be at work or on a podcast or presenting. Even at work, bringing it into the corporate world and presenting to teams or the C-suite. Think about internalizing it rather than memorizing.
Absolutely. And I think some of the basics, like the mechanics of it, I remember watching a talk by Simon Sinek years ago.
Mhm.
I used to teach public speaking at UMass Amherst to the political science students for a couple of years. And this was the video that I would show at the beginning of at the beginning of the semester.
Love Simon.
Love him. And he is a phenomenal speaker. So if you're looking for someone to go look at and watch some talks, he does a really good job. He actually has a class on public speaking.
Yes. Thank you. I was just going to highlight
so,
that.
It's not cheap. But if you are going to be a public speaker, it's definitely worth doing. But one of the things that he says over and over again when people ask him about how did you get to be a great public speaker, right? Or like, what's your number one tip? And his number one tip, time and time again, is that you can never talk too slowly. You can talk too fast, absolutely, but you can never talk too slowly. And he does an example, because even if you use that sentence, and if you say, you can never talk too slowly, normal pace, normal cadence, normal rhythm, great. But if you say, you can never talk too slowly when giving a speech, right? All of a sudden, it's almost like the emotions come out. That when you speak slower, it becomes more of an emotional connection. And so if you are really worried about public speaking and you're really trying to do a great job, practice your speech in half time, because you're always going to talk faster when you're on stage. Right? Yeah. Little nerves, little adrenaline, you're always going to be faster. But if you practice talking and really, really slow down, talk slow, practice it that way, when you get up there and you're speaking normal speed, it sounds great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had somebody come up to me on Friday who was sucking back the tears. And I don't know what it was, what chord I struck, but I struck a chord. So we'll see. We'll see if she reaches out and we have a conversation. I love that. I really love Simon Sinek. He's brilliant. He's super brilliant. And the other thing is that if you are wanting to get into the space of public speaking, is invest in it. Invest in a course or invest in public speaking. Or
join Toastmasters, right? That is the first thing I tell everybody, right? If you're trying to just get better at speaking up at meetings, being the person who does, leads a meeting, presents to the board, right? Or whatever it is, Toastmasters is a phenomenal way to get started with that, right? Every week or every month, you will be practiced. You're going to be put through a kind of time tested and a real curriculum that's really going to show you how
The
to
structure.
speak well, right? Really. And it makes you come up with your speeches. You end up, having to write a variety of different speeches as you're kind of going through the different phases of Toastmasters. It's a great program if you are
is.
someone, or I know here in the US, a lot of community colleges have public speaking classes. I taught at our local community college for a while, public speaking. And the most interesting thing to me was who showed up to the class, right? One of the semesters I taught it, there were 3 people in the class who all were folks who wanted to speak at their church. They were from different kind of
Love
churches, different denominations,
Yeah.
but they all wanted to be the person who got up and did something at their church,
I love it.
but were too nervous. So, right, public speaking can take you through so many different places. I had other folks in my class who were working on their PhD and knew they were going to have to defend their dissertation
Right.
and
Right.
had managed to get to that point without having to do a lot of public speaking, right? Depending on what you're doing, you may not have a lot of time that you're spending talking in front of groups. So,
I love this. I love where this is going. One of the things too that I would suggest to become more mindful of is your presence just in everyday conversation. When you bump into somebody at the grocery store, what is your body language telling others? I actually have become very mindful about crossing my arms. And I noticed yesterday, I was chatting with a friend on the street corner, and I noticed myself cross my arms, and I immediately uncrossed them. And so what I'm trying to do, not that I cross my arms on stage, I don't think I ever, but I'm trying to almost embody my stage presence in everyday life so that it becomes natural and it becomes something that I'm not thinking about. I just show up on stage, and that's my, it's almost like it's my, it's embodying just one presence, whether I'm on stage or I'm on the podcast or I'm with family or I'm with friends or I'm with a client, rather than feeling like I need to, switch on stage, Kristine. Now I get to switch off stage, Kristine.
right, it
It's
goes back to what you talk about all the time, Kristine.
Oh,
even your whole coaching, right? Which is authenticity.
It's the authenticity.
Right? Because I think often if you don't enjoy public speaking, right? If you are one of those people who public speaking is stressful to you, right? And often when I talk to people about this and we start talking about like, why is public speaking stressful? And everyone always says, because everyone's looking at me, right? It's like all eyes are like right here, right? Focused towards you. And that's the part that gets stressful for folks. And I always say, sometimes it's not that you're actually afraid of public speaking. What you're afraid of is it's the self-consciousness, right? You're afraid of being judged because everybody's eyes on you. And so if you can kind of switch your mindset to almost a bit of a, who cares? It helps.
You are being seen. It's vulnerable. It is super vulnerable to be on stage.
And even if it's not on stage, because, right, there's a lot of people who are never going to stand on a stage. But even if it's speaking up at a meeting, right, raising your hand in the classroom and saying something
100%.
or, right, speaking up when something is wrong.
And, vulnerability, and I'm going to quote my favorite, Brené Brown, is that, the definition of vulnerability is simply the courage to show up without controlling the outcome. And it takes a lot of courage to be seen.
Right. And to show up your own self, right? To show up authentically.
Exactly. And you can't control the outcome. And you can't control the judgment. Mel Robbins, there we go. I was quoting all of these famous people. Right? Let them judge you. You know what? It's probably coming from a place of insecurity or jealousy or, a million other different places of trauma. You just have to hold space for yourself in those moments, whether it be little, like the church or meetings. I mean, start small and work your way up.
And I think there's a few other things that I feel like are really small that help people with stuff like public speaking. One years ago, I had somebody who was like mint and ginger, right, are both calming agents. So go grab yourself some ginger mints or some ginger mint tea,
I
right?
love it.
Have that before you speak, right? It just has a natural calming way about it. Um, that helps. Things that are sour tend to help. So you see a lot of speakers do things like lemon water beforehand. Like, yes, it helps the throat, but there's also something about sour that helps in our body chemistry. The other one that I always encourage people is right before. So if you are someone who gets nervous about public speaking, so even if it's right before asking a question, right? You're in a room and you have a question you think you want to ask and you're replaying this question in your head 5,000 times, right? We've all been there where you're like, okay, how do I word it? This, that. And as you're doing that, what happens is you're not focused on anything else, right? You haven't heard what everybody else has been talking about. But often I always tell folks, if you can distract your brain from thinking, I'm about to public speak, you're going to be a lot better. It's almost like right before getting on stage, the people who start pacing and starts rehearsing their entire speech over and over and over again. It's like the worst thing that you can do, right? Instead, figure out how you can distract your brain. For me, I always found math problems help, which sounds really dorky. But even things like a Sudoku puzzle, somebody else who I was coaching to do public speaking years ago started doing crossword puzzles before she got on stage, right? Something that distracts you from sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have to talk. Oh my God, I have to talk, right? Because that's what you don't want to do.
No. I'm going to add a couple of things to that from a very different perspective. So something that I do and did on Friday was I meditated.
Same thing, right? It
And
clears your brain, gets you to
meditation-
not think about it.
Exactly. Breath work. The other piece too, and I say this to individuals when I coach them in interview prep, be done. You have to have a moment of like, I am done. I am not rehearsing. I am not looking at my notes. And you need to have that boundary. The other piece too is, and I did this more or less on Friday, is I cleared my day. I took on one client. It was fine. Outside of that, I really focused on myself and I got fresh air. I made sure that I was hydrated, ate well. I knew I was presenting at 5 something. So I needed, I prepared food and took it so that I had food to eat. But I really protected my space and my energy. I took no phone calls. I was off email. I did very little on social media. And my intention was to protect my space and energy. I was stepping into the unknown and I wanted to do everything that I could to be at my best.
And noted that, if we're talking about public speaking as in you're speaking up in a meeting at work, you can't at work be like, I'm not doing anything all day, right? Like, that doesn't work.
Oh, why not? Come on, protect your space.
Right. I'm protecting my space because I have to speak for 5 minutes at a meeting today. Doesn't usually work. I think but that is a great idea if you're speaking at a conference or giving a talk.
If it's or even a podcast for the first time, think of all the guests that we've had on here that are like having a nervous breakdown before we hit record, and we're like, don't worry about it.
Right. Don't worry. So I think the other part that you brought up that I think is really key is interviews, right? Public speaking or communicating, it is what you do on a job interview. So I was coaching somebody a couple of months ago who was so stressed about a job interview that they wrote out the answer to every possible question that they could think they might ever be asked, which, okay, not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. That's a bad
Any
idea.
guesses how many pages her document ended up?
I'm going to totally guess because you haven't told me this story. I don't know, 35 pages?
76. She wrote a book.
Did they do it with a pen and paper?
No, typed. 76 pages typed. Yes. So at that point, I actually said, you actually have a how to interview for jobs book now that you have written, not a resume guide, not an interview guide, right? So one, all that did was get them to be even more nervous because now they thought they had to memorize this 75-page script.
Oh, bless.
Right? So unless you're some major Hollywood actor, you probably are never, ever, ever going to have to memorize 75 pages. So don't go there. But in the same vein, right, preparing for a job interview, it's the same way as preparing to public speak. You want to internalize it. You want to know your stories. I always tell folks 4 stories is usually a good amount to have. If you have 4 good stories, you can probably answer most questions with those 4. But in the same way, right, protect your energy, show up the best you can. Don't wear brand new clothes where you're going to be fidgeting for every 3 minutes, right? Don't wear clothes that are uncomfortable. Do the things that make it feel comfortable and make it more normal for you so you can show up authentically.
How many conversations have you had over your 1 million years in the space of career where you've been coaching somebody who's like, oh, I got to interview someone. I'm super nervous. I got to interview this person. And so knowing that when you go to an interview, you don't know if that person is like Colleen, and we've done how many interviews in our 25 to 30-year careers. What did I say we had combined? 55 years of experience. Right? And
a lot.
That's the thing. Don't make an assumption that the person that you're having a conversation with isn't just as nervous. Maybe it's their first interview. Maybe they've never interviewed somebody of your caliber. A million different things. And it's okay to be nervous. It means you care.
Right. Well, this has been fabulous. I feel like there are so many things that we could continue to talk about when it comes to public speaking. If you are someone who's listening to this and you think, you know what, I want to be on a podcast and do some public speaking, reach out to Kristine or I. Catch us. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. Connect with us on any of those places. Send us a message. We're always looking for new and interesting people to be on our podcast. So we'd love to have you.
Love it. Thanks, Colleen. Good topic.
Thanks,
so relevant.
So relevant. All right. See you all soon. Is it time for you to add a little squiggle to your career? Join us every week to hear from another guest talk about how they embrace the squiggle.
Subscribe now and find your inspiration.